And hello and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Girl, an audience booked by. And I am so happy to give a warm welcome to the bearded badger himself, independent bookshop owner, publisher, Mr. Paul Handley. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. Great to see you. And you're in your bookshop today.
I am, as you can see behind me here. I've got an array of books. These are the paperbacks that we're stocking, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about them as we move through. But yeah, the bookshop, we're trying to stock a range of books. Obviously the best sellers, but we're also trying to stock a good range from across the independent publishers, people like ourselves and so on, Blue Moose, Influx, Dead Ink, these kind of guys. So yeah, there's a bit of a, there they are.
Yeah, it's a good backdrop to have, definitely. I'm sure there's people zooming in on
zooming in now, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's all the rage at the moment, isn't it? But with the politicians and people scanning their bookshelves to see what it. I don't know what this would define me as. Maybe just a generic independent book lover. Maybe I don't know, but
which is that's I'd take that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, I'm not going to grumble.
So you've not been in this shop. This is your new shop.
Yeah.
And it's in Belper.
That's correct.
And it's part of a larger building, isn't it? Do you want to just give us a bit of background about that?
Yeah. Well, it's part of what's called the 1924 building, which, as the name suggests, it was originally built in 1924. So coming up to parts of the building are coming up to 100 years old. Wow. Which is quite phenomenal. Prior to being what it is now, it's had a number of lives, if you like. It was a factory, a builder's merchant, a dance studio. And then about 12 months ago, a gentleman decided to refurbish it into a series of independent shops. And it's been really sympathetically restored, I think. I mean, you've been, haven't you, Tracy? It's been lovely restored. We've got little cobbled streets in here, a nice little cafe. And there's 16 independent businesses that range from, there's a vintage cycle shop, you've got an illustrator that sits opposite me, there's people, a haberdashery, there's people that do handmade things in here, jewelers. So there's a really, really nice mix of businesses in here. Yeah. And a bookshop, of course.
And a bookshop. I mean, what more? And Belper is quite a sweet little community town as well, isn't it?
Very much so.
So a lot of reason really for people to come and find you if they're in the.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely town. It was named the High Street of the Year, not last year, before last. And there is there's a real independent spirit in the town. Yeah, sure, we have some of the chain stores, but there's also a large proportion of independent stores. And there used to be a bookshop actually at the top of the town, but that shut down about 3.5 years ago. And the feedback we've had so far is people at Belper are so glad that there's an independent bookshop back in town again. So, touch wood, we'll continue to develop that and immerse ourselves within the community further as we go on.
Well, you never know, and maybe that empty shop up the road, and I know the one you're talking about, might even get used again.
You never know. Apparently they're refurbishing it as a bar. So
oh, right. I didn't know that actually.
Different from books, but go on.
Ah, brilliant. Okay, let's get down to business then, because not only are you this fabulous bespoke bookseller in the heart of Belper, but you also started an independent publishing company just prior, dare we say it, to COVID hitting. So how have you gone on with that?
Well, I wouldn't advise it to anyone as a sort of robust business model. However, I mean, when we set the business up, Bearded Badger Publishing, back in January 2020, COVID was just a little, it was a bit tagged on to the end of the news that it was something happening far out in China. And actually, I don't think anybody quite sort of expected it to sort of overwhelm us the way it has. But So yeah, we launched in January of last year. We put out for submissions. We had a healthy response, and this is on both a novel, a range of fiction, and also a poetry imprint called Traverse that we've launched. And then, of course, as everybody knows, in March, the sort of rug was pulled from beneath the feet of a lot of people, us included, and there was a number of implications around that. One, it sort of left me thinking, well, how do I now continue as a new publisher, trying to, if you like, establish themselves and gain a reputation as putting out good quality publications. It's difficult because you don't have a pedigree when you're new. So there is an element of, I don't know if distrust is the word, but sort of, you have to kind of prove yourself in many ways.
It's a kind of uncharted waters, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and I almost felt sort of fraudulent in many ways, calling myself a publisher because we hadn't published anything. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and it was, part of my business strategy was to get out and talk to people, get people enthused about what we were trying to do. And of course, that the opportunity to do that was sort of taken away. And I won't lie, there was times where I did wonder, well, how do we proceed with this? How do we make this work? Or should I just chalk it up and start again at another point in the future? But I'm quite a sort of stubborn fella in many respects.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't pack it in, because you've had. I'm actually reading one of yours at the moment, which is the 7 Nights at the Flamingo Hotel, which I'm 3/4 of the way through. I have to tell you right now, it is not a book I would have immediately chosen, but it's strange how things come into your life. Because you and I met, was it back in March? I can't remember. It was the WEM conference, wasn't it? We were paired
up. Yes, that's right. Yeah, back in March. Yeah.
You were very kind about one of my submissions, and we only had a brief 10-minute chat. But just talking about and thinking about packing it up, and the community really got on board, I think, because everybody had to suddenly get online, and you did the same, and people, I think, have been very good about that, about helping, promoting, getting the word out there. I mean, I came to visit your shop, as a lot of other people have done, ordered from the indies, trying to keep things going. And actually, I found from personal experience, I've been introduced to work that, like I said, may not have actually chosen to pick up. But it's a great book, and I haven't finished it yet.
I'll be honest, I think, as I say, those initial days where it was like, what do we do, have since been surpassed by the benefit of hindsight and what have you. And looking back, and I think, actually, you know what, one of the things that the pandemic did, particularly amongst independent publishers, was it sort of harnessed this feeling that actually maybe there's a strength in numbers rather than acting in individual silos, or and doing our own thing, if you like. We still do that because that's the nature of the business, but it's also this sort of collaborative approach, if you like, this sort of joined hands approach, I think has worked really well across the industry, in the independent publishing industry. And as you say, there's Zoom has been as we're talking now, has been a massive tool that we've really all learned to embrace, to the point where, and I think we spoke about this a while back, in terms of accessibility, it's opened so many doors over the last 12 months. And, and I think, whilst everybody's longing for a return to normal, or whatever that might be, I do think there's a lot of things like the Zoom and making things accessible to people. We shouldn't forget that. We should continue to embrace that, and maybe weld the two together, so that we start doing, the physical things like book readings, events, but also let's not lose sight of the fact that this accessibility,
which would ordinarily exclude quite a large demographic of people, myself included. I have to say, I did say to you that being able to access things online was a huge plus for someone like me through lockdown, but also for so many other people as well. And I think I from what I'm reading around the social media comments, a lot of the conferences that have been attended in this way, they are looking at a hybrid way of moving forward, and I think rightly so, because you're just going to close doors that have only just been opened for accessibility, which it doesn't make.
That was picked up on, and I think you attended the States of Indie conference that was hosted by De Montfort University in Leicester, and that was a common thread throughout. That was, there was a lot of people saying, if this was in the old world, I wouldn't have been able to attend due to a whole host of issues, family life's busy, whatever. But actually, by being able to dip in and out remotely, it just, you could, and sessions being recorded, it just enables it to flex it and become agile to the audience's needs. And I think that's an absolute definite way.
It does, and I think it's one that hopefully organisations are really beginning to take notice of. Well, I hope they are anyway. But I just want to bring you back to although you are quite new to the publishing market, you've already got a novel and 2 poetry chapbooks under your belt. I know you have plans for future publishing as well. So let's just talk a little bit about that, because when we had a chat before, we were saying, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you sit somewhere, the independent publisher sits somewhere between the mainstream, the big 5, as people who are thinking about going into writing, the dream of the TV rights, the film rights, the whole shebang, the agent, that's at one end of the scale. Then you've got the people who just decide to self-publish, Amazon or wherever, Kobo, that whole program. And somewhere in between, you have the independent publisher, which actually has many guises too, because there are those who fund completely, those that expect authors to put a certain amount in. So let's just talk about those different levels and tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, you're right. I mean, the big 5 dominates the marketplace in terms of sales, in terms of revenue, market share, whatever sort of statistic you want to put up there, you will find it dominated by the big 5 or the imprints that sit underneath the big 5. But for my money, and I speak only from my perspective, the big 5, they play so safe now, and I don't see them publishing massive amounts of challenging stuff or new stuff or stuff that perhaps has a niche market. We are getting, I mean, gosh, the celebrity writer marketplace is just saturated for me at the minute. Now that's closed the door to many writers. I think they're only backing the horses they've backed previously that have won, and and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that's just the way it is. But I think what that has done then is you've got a whole raft of independent publishers, as you rightly say there, that sit underneath that are now starting to pick up the caliber of writers that perhaps maybe 10 years ago they would have struggled to convince to come on board with them. So you've seen. If I think about some of the best books I've read over the last few years, it's been from publishers like Blue Moose Books, Influx Press, Gallibegger Press, and then some of the translated novels by the independent presses like Charco and people like that, Tilted Access, Common Press. And these guys are picking up quality writers, they're backing them. They don't have this massive marketing machine behind them, but what they do have is integrity. And for me, they have that sort of passion to say, this is my writer, and I'm putting him there in front of you because I believe him, and I believe in him or her, And I think it's the marketplace for me now has never been better for the independent publishers in many respects.
I think you're right. I think you're right because is it Blue Moose have a bestseller on their hands at the moment because it was featured on Between the Covers. I can't remember the exact title, but it's something like "Should We Fall Behind?"
Yeah,
Or oh, you have it.
that
Ah,
one there. Should we
oh,
fall
I
behind?
got it right.
If
Should we
you've not
fall
read it,
behind?
oh, it's a fabulous book. It really is
But
fabulous
it,
book.
it was on Between the Covers,
Yeah, it
the book
was. Yeah,
program that's on a Monday night, 7:30, and yeah, I mean, that's huge. That
that's it.
is
I can't
really
remember.
starting to compete, isn't it, with
Yeah.
those larger houses?
I generally can't remember. I can't remember the last time or if I have ever seen an independent small press be, part of these sort of TV, the TV book shows. It's as you say, like it's generally dominated by the big five books from the big five, and I understand that. They're the big sellers. They're the ones that are accessible, probably more accessible. You walk in any bookshop and you'll find copies of the Thursday Murder Club, or you'll find
Yeah.
copies of Hamnet and things like that.
Mm.
So I'm not complaining about that. But what's so nice is, I mean, Blue Moose Books, aside from the fact they're lovely people that run it, they're putting out great books. Leonard and Hungry Paul was a big book of theirs from 2019 that, that's still gaining momentum now to a degree. It was Dublin's book of the year, or one Dublin one book in April, where they champion one book across the city. And again, those sort of things, if you look at previous books that have been championed, it was things like Oscar Wilde, James Joyce, Bram Stoker, the Dublin heavyweights, if you like.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, you've got Ronan Hessian and Blue Moose Books. And I just think, are we seeing a little, a shift in the...
Well, I think possibly, and I wonder
publishing?
if there's a freedom that comes with your independence, that the bigger houses, the larger houses, don't take that risk, and it filters down and influences those who buy, the book buyers in the larger chains as well. And as you were saying before, if you were to walk into one of the larger chain bookstores, you would literally have to fight your way past the celebrity endorsed or written or ghost written, but the celebrity books, in order to reach any kind of alternative range beyond that.
Absolutely right. And I think, it's me personally, if I go into a Waterstones generally, and I consider myself relatively well versed on books and publishing, working within it. But even then, sometimes there's that many books. I'll play safe and I'll pick a book from an author that I'm familiar with, or a publisher, that I'm, a Penguin modern classic, which I know I'll probably will fit my reading sensibilities. And I think that's where, also within this middle range here, as well as independent publishers, you've got independent booksellers, and the two are very much entwined in many respects, and
and you're both, that's pretty neat, really, that you are wearing both hats, and you can see what's going on here as a reader, as a seller, and also perhaps people coming in who want you to stock their work, so you have the freedom there to decide. I mean, that kind of brings us neatly on to that whole conversation, really, doesn't it? Because I imagine that you do get approached by people, and maybe the quality of some of the self-published stuff that comes your way or isn't necessarily as tip-top, or maybe there is something that is so good you think, wow, so that's, again, it's down to the person presenting their work, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, in the 6 weeks we've been open, I've had a lot of people come in and sort of plug in their self-published book, and firstly, what makes it difficult as a bookseller is there's often you've not heard of these books because, if you're a writer going down the self-publishing route, you've got to wear a whole host of different hats. So you've got, as well as being the writer, you've got to be the marketer, you've got to be the person that manages all the social media, you've also got to be the salesperson. You've got and I don't think sometimes that those roles don't fit naturally to everyone, you know. And
No.
I think that's where the benefit of a publisher is. You do the writing, you hand it over in many respects, and say, you make that work for me. And what I've found is, as some of the self-published stuff that comes in, that I've seen the last few months and stuff, that it's a mixed bag. It really is. There's some really good stuff out there, both in terms of the content, the quality of the writing, and also the quality of the presentation of the book. You know, the aesthetics, if you like, the paper quality, the cover design, that sort of stuff. But then there's also some pretty poor stuff as well. And I think, you know, it's if you're putting a book out there and you're competing with, you know, like we say, something that looks like that, and your book doesn't look anywhere near as good as that, it's difficult to sell, and it's difficult even as a bookseller to sell that kind of stuff as well. So, you know, it's.
And I wonder as well whether
conundrum.
if they're creating something that isn't quite up to par, and we all learn as we go. I realise that, you know, there may be people tuning in who are thinking about that process. But I wonder as well, you know, they have how much consideration they give to the profit margin in terms of what it's cost them to produce it. And then somebody like you as that middle ground who has a bookshop, and they're hoping that you will stock it. You know, it's like bargain hunt, isn't it? You need to allow a profit to occur for each person, so it has to be realistic.
Absolutely, and I think that's, you know, the whole self-publishing machine, for the want of a better phrase, does it allow for that value to be built in? I'm not convinced it does in some respects, because I'll give you a good example. I had somebody come in the shop with a book and said, "Oh, will you stock my self-published book?" I said, "Yeah, let's have a look." And I said, "Well, how much does it retail at?" He said, "Oh, it's on Amazon at $5.99. I said, "Well, how much will you, you know, what sort of trade price?" He said, "Oh, well, it'd have to be $5.99. And I, well, I'm not going to make any money then. You can see how that gives me a commercial problem. You know, and she said, "Oh, but you could sell it for more." I said, "But who's going to buy it for more when they can get it delivered to their door for $5.99? It's so I think it's that whole, you know, and does that, in many ways, does that devalue the whole value chain? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But for example, self-publishing generally, it's a risk aversion way of doing it, isn't it? Because you can print on demand. The good side to that is you don't need any cash up front to do it, really. You know, you're basing it on somebody buys a book, you print it and sell it. The flip side of that then is that the quality sometimes is variable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a way for people to cut their teeth within publishing, a bit like when I first started writing a blog. You know, it's the first time you put yourself out there. It's somewhere to learn your craft, maybe, and then move onwards. I'm thinking about my last guest, actually, Val Keough, who started out self-publishing and really did learn on the job, and has now been picked up by a publisher and is doing very well. But she had to learn a lot of lessons on the way, as I think anybody does starting out on a journey.
It comes down to, do you want to learn those lessons? Do you want to pick up those skills? Or actually is being the writer, the creative element, is that is that where you see your product?
That's, I mean, it's all about choices. I mean, I've got my notes here: small pond, big pond, you know. So if all you're seeing is the big pond of the big five, and you keep pounding at that door and maybe it never really gets open to you, you are either going to give up as a writer, or if you've got any sense at all, you're going to start looking at what else is available. And this is where we start filtering down through the layers and realizing that there are a lot of choices out there, and it's like there is someone for everyone. And maybe for a writer, there is the right editor, the right publisher. It's just a case of doing your homework, your due diligence. It's not just going to come, nobody's going to come and knock on your door.
No, they're not. No, that's one thing that is for sure, you know. And it's about, you know, it's like I say, the big five, they won't accept any unsolicited submissions. Everything has to come through an agent. They all have their preferred agencies. Then you come down a level. I mean, there's some of the independent publishers will only accept agented submissions. And then if you're going then for the smaller publishers like myself, like Bearded Badger, you know, have a look at what sort of stuff they put out, and you know, does
Is
it
it a
match
good
what you're
match?
writing?
Yes. Are you in the right
That's,
area? Yeah.
you'd be surprised how often just. In fact, I think it was Gally Beggar actually. One of the things they said was familiarise yourself with our books, and it was, and some of the stories that I heard there after people who didn't do that, and it becomes a bit, it's hard enough as it is to try and read through tons of manuscripts, especially if 30% of them aren't really ever anything that you're going to publish, and it's you kind of rely, without that agent sort of filter, you're relying on maybe the writer to do that themselves in many ways to sort of.
Well, they have to take
I get
responsibility. Yeah, I mean, yes, it has to be a team thing. I think there is, perhaps there is this sense among some writers. Well, I've done the work, therefore it's done, and I hand it. But it doesn't stop there. That's the reality. You have a responsibility to submit something that you've literally done your absolute best with, and hope that somebody will see that, and then between you will make it even better. And that's hard. That it is hard work, but
hard process,
if that's the path you've chosen, it's what you've got to be willing to do. You were talking about submissions, and I know that a lot of the independent houses now have, whereas before it was kind of open season all year. I don't think that's quite the case anymore, is it?
No, I think a lot tend to have a specific submissions window, and then they'll have like what they call a reading period or a reading window, and then thereafter they'll sit around and decide what they're going to publish thereafter. And I think, well, as you say, maybe previously that didn't happen. It was just, people would just send stuff in and it would get published or not published. But I think the benefit of the reading window is that it kind of adds a bit more structure, especially like for me now, managing the bookshop and the publishing side of things.
Yeah.
I need to have some framework, some structured framework.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd just be constantly chasing my tail. And that's not good for me. It's not good for anybody that's submitting, and it's a big thing to submit your work to someone as well, because you're saying, this is me on page, and even when it's non-biographical, if it's fiction, there's a lot of your heart, soul, sweat, tears, blood gone into that manuscript. So I fully understand. It's a big thing, and
it would be awful if you missed that nugget simply because you were tired and inundated.
Yeah.
Like you say, you need to have some kind of structure to the business, which is saying, okay, so from I don't know, July to September, we'll be accepting submissions, and then it closes. And I can see, obviously, the sense. Is that the way forward for you? Is that how you're thinking?
I think so. Yeah, I think having that manageable process is definitely where we want to be at, and we'll fine tune this along the way. But we're going to open up submissions soon for next year, and we'll see how that goes.
And you're looking for quality novels and poetry, and
this is the question I get asked a lot: is what are you looking for? And the true answer is good writing.
Yeah.
I know that sounds really generic and really sort of probably not that helpful in many ways, but that's essentially what we're looking at.
It's as simple and as hard as that, isn't it? It's looking. And there was a conversation recently. Taker Bellamy was asked that. The question on, I think it was Facebook, about people submitting their work to magazines and having difficulty. And a lot of the replies were saying they just don't anymore, because it's hard to get something in one of the bigger magazines as it is to get an agent or to be noticed elsewhere. And it was surprising how many people have gone down the self-publishing, or they just don't want to expose themselves to the rejection, if you like, because like you say, it is, if you've been working on something for years and years, it's very hard to take that rejection, except it's also part and parcel of the writer's journey, isn't it?
It is. It's. I mean, it's never a nice thing to have to write an email or a letter to someone and say, "I'm sorry, you know, we'll not be publishing your work." But it is part and parcel of what the industry is, I suppose. And you know, you want to publish every good bit of writing, and you can't even publish every good bit of writing that you get, because it's an expensive business, publishing, and you have limits as to what you can publish, and it's tough, and it is tough, and I understand there why, from a writer's perspective, sometimes you think, oh, forget that, I'm gonna go take my own path, and I fully understand that. And it's that balancing act, isn't it?
It is, and it's about choices and looking at the market and deciding what might be a good fit for you, trying it, maybe trying again, and then maybe coming to a decision at some point about the way forward. But as usual, we've run out of time. I could talk and talk and talk and listen to you for hours, but hopefully you will come back and visit.
Yes, definitely.
Tell us how you're getting on. And just to remind people that it's the Bearded Badger Bookshop in the 1924 building, Belper, Derbyshire, but you also do sales online.
Yes,
and I will be putting your website in the notes below the video for anybody who would like to. And your submission window is open.
We're going to open that in probably be July for probably a 4 to 6 week period for the fiction slash, well, it doesn't have to be fiction, actually, it can be anything really. The good writing.
Good writing, please. Good writing only.
And
good
then,
writing only. But they can find that out through your website, I would think.
Yeah, everything will be on the website, all over the social media channels that we're on. Twitter. We have 2 accounts on Instagram, one for publishing, one for the bookshop, just to keep them separate, and a single account on both Facebook and Twitter. So not that many bearded badgers about. So we generally come up quite high up in searches if you put bearded badger in. So
brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you so much, Paul, for talking to us. And I've just got time to say that next time I will be speaking to the wonderful Anne Goodwin, who is a former clinical psychologist. She's published with Inspired Quill, who I think you've come across before, another independent house.
Yeah.
And her latest book, I've read it, Matilda Windsor is Coming Home. I loved it. She has 2 other books out, so I'm really looking forward to that conversation with her next time. But again, thank you, Paul, for joining us. Best of luck to you. And I hope you get lots of sales.
Thank you very much. Yeah, lovely to talk to you, Tracy.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.